Hello and welcome to another TLDR Brexit Explained video. In this one, we're going to be taking a look at Boris Johnson's announcement on Friday that the UK and EU are looking at an Australia-style exit, which is government speak for a no-deal Brexit. We're going to unpack how negotiations reached this point, what happens now, and whether a no-deal Brexit is really the most likely outcome. Before we start, a quick shout out to our other channels. You might already know that we have a separate channel for US and EU news, with those covering things from the US presidential election and Supreme Court battle, to Europe's COVID strategy and Facebook's plans to potentially pull out of Europe. We also have one other channel, where we share 3-minute daily news updates. You can find all three linked down below. So, as our regular viewers will know, there was an EU summit on Thursday, which was the most recent deadline for Brexit talks, with both sides hoping to have a Brexit deal ready to discuss at the summit. Now, every time there's been a Brexit deadline before this, they've just moved the deadline back a bit later and said, we're still making progress, don't worry about it. But they're now getting really close to the end of the transition period, so this is no longer an option. And that lack of time is super important, because any trade deal takes time to write up into a legal text and then ratify. This isn't a quick process, so time is really needed. Not least because any Canada-style deal, which is what the UK wants, needs to be ratified by all 38 national assemblies within the EU. And the longer they keep trying to squeeze out a deal, the less time both have to prepare for a no deal. So on Thursday, Boris Johnson and David Frost went to Brussels to try and finally sort something out. Pretty quickly, it became clear that negotiations weren't going brilliantly. And at about 6 o'clock on Thursday evening, the EU published their conclusions on EU-UK relations. Anyway, you don't have to read the whole thing. It basically says that there hasn't been sufficient progress for a deal, especially on level playing field, which includes state aid provisions, governance and fisheries. And the EU called on the UK to, and I quote, make the necessary moves to make an agreement possible. Pretty soon after that, UK chief negotiator David Frost tweeted that he was disappointed by the conclusions and surprised by the suggestion that to get an agreement, all future moves must come from the UK. You can probably see what's happening here. They failed to reach an agreement, and now both sides have started a blame game in anticipation of no-deal chaos. Anyway, on Friday, Boris Johnson gave a televised speech, which, in practice, confirmed that a no-deal really is looking likely. It's worth analysing this speech in a bit more detail, because it's how the UK are going to try and spin the no-deal fallout in the coming months, assuming there is a fallout. That's because it's worth remembering that before Brexit, various Conservatives proclaimed that a deal would be easy. So if they fail to reach one, and the outcome of that failure is bad, then they'll want to try and shift the blame somehow, hopefully to the EU. By the way, that's not us saying that the EU won't also try and spin this to their advantage. There's no anti-UK bias here. It's just that this is high-stakes politics, so of course there's going to be a bit of narrative spinning. Anyway, the speech opens with Johnson saying that all the UK ever really wanted was a Canada-style free trade deal, based on friendship and free trade. According to Johnson, the EU won't allow this because they want to control our legislative freedom and our fisheries.
That we wanted nothing more complicated than a Canada-style relationship.
Now, Johnson's going to mention Canada and Australia quite a lot in this speech.
Canada-style, Australia, Canada. Australia's solution, Canada deal, Canada.
So, as a recap, a Canada-style deal would be based, unsurprisingly, on the EU's trade deal with Canada, known as CETA. Basically, it means zero tariff, zero quota trade, but with less level playing field stuff. So, no common regulations on workers' rights or state aid or environmental legislation. An Australia-style deal is, as we've said before, basically just a no deal. Australia and the EU don't have a comprehensive trade deal, but they have some ad hoc mini deals which do make trade a little easier. For example, there's some mutual recognition of standards, which means that the EU recognises Australian standards. So, for example, if a product meets Australian safety laws, it doesn't need to prove it meets EU safety standards too, and vice versa. This is minimal stuff though, and it's not even been agreed between the UK and EU just yet. Anyway, back to the speech, and that's Johnson's first point really. In his eyes, the UK made a reasonable request for a Canada-style deal, and the EU were unreasonable for refusing it.
It does seem curious that after 45 years of membership, they can offer Canada terms they won't offer us.
And Johnson also accuses the EU of refusing to negotiate in good faith.
And given that they have refused to negotiate seriously for much of the last few months,
so you can see what the UK no-deal narrative is going to be here. We asked for something reasonable, and the EU were unreasonable in refusing it. It's worth saying that the EU refusing a Canada-style deal is nothing surprising. Michel Barnier ruled it out all the way back in February, and they have pretty robust reasoning for it. When doing a deal with Canada, the EU says that it was able to give Canada greater freedom and control because the nation's a long way away, and the EU does relatively little trade with it. So if Canada slashed environmental protections or labour rules to make themselves more competitive, it wouldn't impact the EU too badly. However, you might have noticed the UK is a fair bit closer, and the two do far more trade together. So the EU says it's important for both sides to align further to make sure that neither can undermine the other's economy. Anyway, after this bit, Johnson goes on to talk about what an Australia-style deal will look like, and he's optimistic about this.
We will prosper mightily as an independent, free trading nation, controlling our own borders, our fisheries, and setting our own laws.
And Johnson gives two reasons for his optimism. Firstly, according to Johnson, there were always going to be some changes in January, deal or no deal, so no stress.
Because we always knew that there would be change on January the 1st, whatever type of relationship we had. And so now is the time for our businesses to get ready and for our hauliers to get ready, for travellers to get ready.
Now, we're not going to properly evaluate this argument because it's not the topic of this video, but there's obviously a difference between preparing for a deal and a no deal in terms of short-term disruption. And we've done videos on this before, so if you're interested, then you can click the link in the description to those. Johnson's second reason for optimism is the Australia-style mini-deals that he plans on doing. Basically, if they can't get a comprehensive Canada-style trade deal, Johnson's still optimistic that they can sort out some basic cooperation agreements. In the video, he mentions social security, aviation, nuclear cooperation, and road haulage.
And of course, we're willing to discuss the practicalities with our friends, where a lot of progress has already been made, by the way, on such issues as social security and aviation, nuclear cooperation, and so on.
Again, these would help minimise no-deal disruption, especially an agreement on road haulage, but they're pretty minimal and nothing to really get too excited about. Anyway, the final takeaway from Johnson's speech is that the UK won't make any further concessions in the negotiations. As we mentioned before, Johnson accused the EU of not taking negotiations seriously, and in the rest of the speech, he really pushed the idea that the EU needed to offer something new for there to be any chance of a deal, saying that unless there was a, quote, fundamental change of approach from the EU, the negotiations are finished.
That after 45 years of membership, they are not willing, unless there's some fundamental change of approach, to offer this country the same terms as Canada.
This should be especially disheartening for anyone who wants a deal, because if you remember the EU summit conclusions, that basically means that the EU and UK are both saying, we're not moving, you have to move. It's worth noting that this doesn't definitely mean that there'll be a no deal. There's still a chance that a last minute deal could come through. But this is, at least in our estimations, the least likely a deal has ever looked. The EU seems a little more optimistic, with EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tweeting, "The EU continues to work for a deal, but not at any price. As planned, our negotiation team will go to London next week to intensify these negotiations." EU negotiator Michel Barnier retweeted this, but it seems that Britain has different ideas, with Downing Street telling the EU that there was no point in Barnier making the trip, with Frost apparently withdrawing the invitation. So it's clear that Britain is really trying to force the EU to make the first move, or they're not invited to London. What do you think of the UK government's reaction though? Do you think letting negotiations collapse and just preparing for a no deal is a good strategy? Or are you hoping for more out of these negotiations? And do you think that the EU is being reasonable in its negotiation strategy? Or do you think it's being too rough with the UK? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, with a no deal coming up, it seems like there might be a lot more to say about Brexit and its impacts in the months and years to come. So if you want to follow that conversation, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we post. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.